I'm a musicologist, I'm disabled, it's fairly obvious, and I loved playing in band as a kid, but I was pretty much the only disabled kid in any school or community band I ever played with in Australia, or at least the only obviously disabled one. So this whole program, I guess, is designed to try and provide kids today with what my generation didn't have, and that's how we run it.
Okay. Hello, I'm a trumpet player. I learnt in a government school. I rarely saw students, peers with a disability learning throughout my year 7 to 12, nor did I find them in higher education when I did an education degree. I rarely found them in the professional field beyond that. And as a secondary education instrumental music teacher, I found myself horribly prepared for dealing with disabled students in secondary schools. And it's really 20 years of experience of failing dramatically and learning what really works best or better for the students in my care that has allowed me to shape some opinions and continuing research now in my role in the Conservatorium of Music, where I actually deliver a Master of Music Performance teaching degree. So I'm now teaching the next generation of instrumental music teachers in Victoria with the principles of inclusivity, diversity and equity of opportunity.
So Leon conducts our band on a Saturday and then teaches his students what he learnt during the week.
Yeah. So, expanding on that, the context within Victoria and much of Australia, certainly urban Australia around our capital cities, is that it provides fulsome instrumental music opportunities in the vast majority of government schools. So school will have a trumpet teacher, a clarinet teacher, a percussion teacher, etc. However, there is endemic gatekeeping, both at the school level, that is principals and administration may say, well, this school isn't really appropriate for you, how about you go down to what are termed special schools down the road. There may be the kind of gatekeeping that would suggest, well, why don't you just concentrate on the maths and the science and the English and the core things and don't worry about the music or the arts. So there's that kind of gatekeeping. And then when it comes to instrumental music provision, there is gatekeeping at the head of department and the instrumental teaching levels. So, we're too busy, there's no way you can get up on stage, we don't have the teaching time, through to I'm a teacher, I can't cope with these particular students.
I'm sure you've heard all of that
Yes.
before in your own
Indeed.
situations. So the way our program I guess meets those needs is we provide a bridging program. We work within Melbourne Youth Orchestras, which is our largest private provider of ensemble education in Australia, and we feed up into them. Our students are aged between 8 and 14. We use standard and adaptive instruments depending on the needs of the kid. And we are open, and this is was a bit controversial at the time when I applied for funding, we are open to quote any student who has struggled to access instrumental music education as a result of being disabled, deaf or neurodivergent. We had a lot of people tell us we should concentrate on one thing or another, blind kids, physically disabled kids, and for us that was kind of missing the point. We think that music is for everyone. So we run 2 ensembles. We have the beginner band, which Leon conducts, and we have our foundation ensemble, which is kind of where kids are learning sort of about loud and soft, fast and slow and those kind of things. But the important thing is that it is a bridging program. So they graduate up from one to the other, and then they also have the chance to graduate into Melbourne Youth Orchestras. We currently have 4 of our ex-students playing in the mainstream ensembles. And our next step, I guess, is to look at creating a senior performing ensemble for those kids who realistically are never going to or don't want to play in a mainstream orchestra. So our recruitment process is, I'm going to go through this really quickly because we've been doing this, like some of these, we've had an hour, now we have 20 minutes. So we start by interviewing students and their parents on Zoom, just so that we know that we have everything in the classroom we need when they arrive. We then have Come and Try Day, which is sponsored by Yamaha, and where they can and we also have a range of our own sort of accessible instruments, and kids can try whatever they want to play. If you've got no arms and you want to blow a bassoon, today is your day to have a go. But through that we help them choose an instrument that meets their needs, but more importantly, physical needs, but more importantly meets their musical needs. And then from that, a few of our students go through to what we call instrument fittings, where if we're not still struggling to find something that works for them. So that's our recruitment process. This is our foundation ensemble that I mentioned. So these are kids with really high support needs. It's one-on-one, sometimes two-on-one, 2 adults to 1 child. And look, on some levels, yes, they're learning basic concepts, but for some students it really is, it's giving us more time to help them find an instrument that works for them. One of the things I say a lot is the kids in this group are no less musically skilled than the kids in the next group up, or the kids in the junior band of Melbourne Youth Orchestras. We just need to find a way in for them. And then there's the beginner band.
The beginner band.
Leon runs.
We will explore the instrument, get to know the instrument, be curious, have fun exploring a particular instrument. So this is the first couple of weeks. I'll have one-to-one or small group sessions with various students, and then we'll move into an ensemble. As you can see, we work through a band method book when we are in an ensemble, standards of excellence. We do mainstream kinds of music. We explore music literacies. And I'll get into some of the ways that we do that a little bit later, but integral to what we do is improvisation, music making, music creating, being a curious, creative person first and foremost. So here we are. Here is
So the first photo was week 1. Yeah. This is year 2. Sorry, go on.
And this is a good circle of what we do. We operate in a circle. We're a democratic group. I might conduct, I might direct, but I might pass it on to one of the students. We will share our challenges. We will share our successes. If we get to hear about challenges and we get to hear about successes and overcoming challenges together, that's quite empowering for everyone in the room. Music may not be easy, but it's something that we enjoy, we remain curious, we make sure it's continually fun, and we, I guess as a community of practice, help each other get better. Yeah.
So one of the big aspects that I'm really passionate about in our program is that most of our staff are either disabled or neurodivergent. Leon's our one normie. We don't hold that against him. We still let him play. And that's because some of our kids have literally never met an adult that looks like them, especially the ones who are going through special schools. So this is just a lovely photo because Zoe was wearing the world's best t-shirt for this moment. For those of you who can't see, there's a photo of our dancer in residence at the Victorian College of the Arts, Dr Melinda Smith, who has cerebral palsy, working with a student with cerebral palsy, and the student is wearing a t-shirt that says "Mind Blown." And because this was really the first time Zoe had met an adult that looked like her, they did a dance workshop together. And honestly, the next, 2 weeks later, I walked in to Zoe and her mum having a discussion about what Zoe's PhD should be on when the time comes. So I don't think that would have happened had she not met Dr Melinda Smith.
Yeah. As I say, you can't beat it if you can't see it. Okay.
We're going to show a very, very short clip of our kids conducting.
The adaptive bridging music.
It takes a bit to get there. We apologise because, like I said, we've been cutting this down. It
hasn't.
Keep going. We can't see the time. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh.
There he is. Go.
There we go.
So this is one of our students conducting through dance, really.
We support students across a wide range of disabilities and neurodivergencies, those blind or have low vision, requiring tactile forms of music literacy support, or those that engage with technologies, allowing musical connection and communication for all. The Adaptive Bridging Programme has a wide range of instruments available that are specifically designed to be accessible to people with disability. We incorporate leading specialist...
All right, we'll leave that there.
The adapt...
There we go.
All right.
Case study.
So very quickly, we're going to talk about how we help students choose instruments. And we're going to use two students who completely confounded our expectations of what, quote unquote, a person with their disability should want to play, and how we allowed them to make that decision. So our first case study is Saskia. She's 12. She has a degenerative neurological condition, and she has an 8-second delay when she processes information. So if you tell her a joke, you then have to wait 8 seconds and then she will laugh, which, as you can imagine, in life is pretty limiting, but in music, where we're working on time, is quite problematic. She understands everything that's going on around her, but because of that 8-second delay, it's very hard for her to participate a lot of times. Now, we have an eye harp. She uses eye gaze to communicate. We thought, like, was it Sarah's son, that she would just go for that and go, this is my first language, I'm into it, let's do it. And she took one look at it and said, I use that at school every week. I'm not doing that on the weekend. So we were like, okay, what do we do now? And of course, mums always know best. And her mum told us that any skill she had prior to when she started to degenerate neurologically, which was when she was 3, she maintains. So she has can we click forward to the next one? She has a toy called Baby Tad, Tad being short for tadpole. It's a little, for those of you who can't see the picture, it's a little frog. It's got 6 buttons on his tummy and 1 each on his hand, so 8 buttons, right? We're musos, 8 buttons, that's a great number. And it's like a Simon Says game. So it plays you a configuration of notes that flash up, and if you can copy that within a certain period of time, it will then reward you with flashing lights and the song. So this kid who normally has an 8-second delay, because she's been using this tool since before she started to degenerate, it'll flash and she'll just go boom, 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 and then grin at you. And her mum said, well, could we use this skill? Because it gets around her neurological damage. So learning new skills physically for Saskia is really hard, so we used a skill she already had. So we got one of our PhD students who did a bit of quick frog surgery and turned it basically into a MIDI instrument. So now those 8 buttons can be swapped out for any 8 notes for any particular song, or for percussive notes, or whatever she wants to play. So if we go to the next slide, here she is with her, we then had to build a stand for it, because what's a musical instrument without a stand? And this is Saskia with her frogophone. She's still very much an emergent frogophone player, but I would say she's probably the world's best frogophone player. But she very much knows it's her instrument. She's proud of it. She carries it in a little case. She practices really hard every week. Those buttons on the front, back one, go back. Those buttons on the front then become a method for music literacy. So because we need to use tablature because it's a MIDI instrument, so if we put an A here for one note, the next song that might not be an A. So a stave isn't great for her. So we can use these symbols. So down the bottom you can see the chord progression for her favourite song, Best Life, which we played for her at the end of year concert. And so that becomes a pathway to music literacy for her as well. That's really technical. Not everything we do is so technical. It freaks music teachers out. When I show them the frogophone, they're like, we could never do that. So here's what we do with 2 rubber bands and a chopstick. I think we can all do this. We had a second student, Tiana, who had a stroke. So we've talked a bit about strokes today. She played violin beforehand. She was, we're like, right, you've got one hand. Here's a trumpet. And she's like, violin. We went through every concept we could think of for one-handed instrument. She's like, violin. So we got out the violin. We had to reverse it. We took it to a luthier. So she now plays backwards because it's her left hand that doesn't work. We had to build a bow guide because her bow hand would just kind of like go off the edge. And we had to build a bow grip for her because she had very little movement in this hand, but she could move this shoulder to move her bow back and forth. So you can see that little grip that you've got there. Before you phone me, yes, it's too tight. Yes, her fingers went blue. That is the prototype. It is looser now. Don't email me.
You can buy the new version out here in the foyer.
Rachel came to visit us last year. She saw it. She said, can I adapt that? We said yes, because part of our funding is that we release things on open access. And so if you want to buy one of these bow grips, I think they're £10 in the foyer.
That's a mirror for the success of this event and the people within it is that we share information, share knowledge and resources.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
So Tiana has now graduated from us. She was our first to graduate. She went up into the first junior orchestra of MYO last year. This year she's gone up another orchestra. She's playing in firsts, and she's just going wild. She's, we said to her, when she was adamant to play violin, said, well, if you do this, you're always going to look different because you're playing backwards. And she's like, I don't care, I look different anyway, don't care. Great. And we said, and you're going to have to work really hard because this is not an instrument that is designed to be played one-handed. And she went, right, I can do that, I want to play violin, and that's what she's done. We get a lot of credit for Tiana's success, but it's really all her. I'm looking at the clock, we're moving forward, so that's her receiving a stroke award, that's her in her junior orchestra. That's video.
We'll move on.
We'll move on. Oh, you can move on. Next.
Yeah. Okay.
Go for it.
Applications. We immerse in improvisation, a lot of call and response, but then we start initiating students to be creative on whatever instrument they've got in whichever way possible. As I said, we operate in democratic means, dialogic approaches. We use a pedagogy of participation, so it's inclusive of all students, inclusive of parents in our rehearsals as well, and carers. So everyone has a say in what we're doing, and certainly we try and include all the students to make musical decisions. If that's a reflection of that sounds of intent, we really reflect that too in trying to get students to make better and increasingly more sophisticated musical decisions that impact the ensemble in positive ways. As I said, they take full possession of the creative act. All right, and we do have a series of concerts throughout the year, and there's a big one at the end of the year.
So this is them at our largest concert hall in Melbourne. One of our kids who has a mum who's a music teacher proudly said, Mum, I've played at Hamer Hall and you haven't. But I'm looking at the time, so that we have time for at least one question. I will just end this by saying our future visioning, as I said, we're now looking at creating a senior ensemble, which we think of very similarly as your sort of open orchestras model here. We have the Brisbane 2032 Paralympics coming up, so we have our eyes very much set on having our kids there. We probably have room for a few more if anyone wants to come and join us. I say that without the Paralympics hasn't invited us yet. We're just encouraging them to do so. We've got a few years to go, but that is our big aim, to have the kids on the world stage there.
And of course, it starts with educating teachers, and as we say there, we can reduce barriers by equipping pre-service music teachers to support future students with disability by including experiential seminars led by students with a disability.
So we have a minute and a half left. We can either go to questions.
Let's go to questions.
Or we could show the video of Tiana. Where's she hiding? There she is.
Hi everyone, my name is Tiana and today I will be playing on Sugarfoot number 5 in the end of this year.
We're going to talk to you today about using what we call a map to guide adaptive instruction. And this is something that's developed out of about 10 years of research that we've done. over the past 10 years. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on how this happened. Jennifer and I both were blessed with children with physical disabilities, and we're both musicians. I'm a pianist, and she is a strings violin teacher. And when we began adopting our children, we started separately in 2 different states teaching them adaptive instruction on our instruments. And when she had come into town, our daughter, my youngest daughter, Allie, wanted to learn how to play cello. And I had been unable to find a cello teacher willing to try. Allie has arthrogryposis and has to play in an adaptive position. And so Jennifer and I worked together, and we determined that we could figure out a way. Jennifer determined a way for Allie to go ahead and learn how to play, and we realized at the time that we could maybe work together and offer our services to other children. So we launched a camp called the Cincinnati Adaptive Music Camp, and started with piano and strings, and then over the years we expanded that to include other instruments, brass, guitar, and I think that was it. We also offered musical, like opportunities for musical exploration. But through the course of our conversations, what we started to figure out before we launched the camp was there were some things that we were each doing as we approached adaptive instruction. So we were each making changes to the instrument or changes to the music, changes to the positioning. There were these kind of domains of playing that we were both addressing differently with our instruments, but there seemed to be kind of a theme across that. And so taking those conversations, I came up with what was the first template for what we called a music adaptation plan, or a MAP. And the purpose of this map was, with these camps, we had kids coming in from all over the country. And we needed a way to communicate what we were doing back to those instrumental teachers, back wherever their hometown was. And so this first map that we developed, this first map that I came up with, really focused on those constructs we came up as equal themes between both instruments. So it was kind of generic, kind of general, and we used that to kind of catalog what we were doing, along with some videos and things like that, to send home with each of these students for their private lessons and instructions. So what we found at that point is that the teachers, we increased up to 7 teachers over the years, and not everybody interpreted the maps the same way and what information. So after collecting them for about 10 years, I took 27 of them and printed them out and decided to go ahead and code those and just see what kinds of themes we came up. I started with the constructs we had determined for the first map, and I did that. At the time, we had the 27 maps. They covered 6 different instruments. Of those 27, 40% of them were original or initial maps, like a student was just learning how to play. The rest were continuing, because we saw a need to, the students would come back as they were advancing more and more. And those maps that I used for the body of the data collection were created by 7 different instrumental teachers. And what I did then, like I said, I printed them out and I coded them based on those initial constructs and then analytic memos in the side. And with those analytic memos and the initial constructs, I came up with more codes and just kind of refined that, and then went and entered all that data in a Microsoft spreadsheet, where then I could code each piece of information out of each code, or out of each map. And then on the 3rd round of coding, I went through and I organized all of that data by instrument, code, grouping of students, and if they were initial or beginning, to see what emerged for outcomes from this. So what we found is that there were codes related to background knowledge, which I have up there. Those came across all of the maps, or most of the maps. Positioning, both related to the instrument and the musician, connection to the instrument. And then physical differences were not always the same. Sometimes the references in the maps were residual missing limbs, we had strength, range of motion, finger independence. Those were all considerations that had to be taken into mind when designing what the students were going to do. Then there were specialized devices, which were stands or seating, or sometimes specialized devices, we just labeled them as other, That would be like a bow hold or some kind of muff for a brass instrument, something like that. And consumable supplies were definitely a part of all of this as well. Duct tape is our friend, we know that, as is heavy medical grade Velcro. And then technique actually broke down to technical or traditional and adaptive. And that was the thing. A lot of what went into these maps were simply good music instruction. There was not something, adapted. They just needed good music instruction. We also saw the themes of changes to the instrument. Sometimes we would have to change the design, like flip the strings or something like that. Sometimes we would do a change in the size of the instrument, switch that child from a trumpet to a cornet, or not move them up to a larger size cello as soon as we typically would, or something like that. There are, of course, changes to music, which was most often with piano, and assistive tech considerations that had to be taken into considerations, and then what we called future considerations. So we had a massive amount of data. I think I had about 800 and something data points from these maps to organize this with, and came out with some outcomes. And so the first outcome was that there are some general considerations that we want to take into consideration when we are approaching adapted music. The musical background and training of the child, the disposition of the student, how interested they are. If you've taught music, you know sometimes the parents are more interested than the child is, and the familial and community support available to the child as well. But more importantly, I identified these kind of specific adaptation domains. And these domains are really what guided adaptation for each of these instruments. It was the positioning of the instrument or the musician, the manner in which the musician connects to the instrument, the technique that they use to play it, changes to the instrument itself, and changes to the music. That each of the teachers needed to consider each of these domains as a starting point when they were figuring out how the child is going to play the instrument. And then also we had to think about adaptive supports. So adaptive supports fell into these categories: specialized seating, specialized devices, stands, and consumable supplies. So with all of that, the last thing we need to consider is the future planning when we're trying to figure out how to do this. What we discovered is you can't solve everything at once, right? And so you need to have a plan for what's coming down the road, to be thinking like as they move to this more advanced stage of playing, what issues are we going to run into? What do we have to problem solve like that? And so because of that, there's a future planning section on our newly devised maps. And then that can be revisited annually. And also we need to take into consideration the goals of the student. So for instance, right now I'm teaching an adult player piano, and his goal is to be able to songwrite to accompany his singing. So that's going to be a different emphasis on how we do it, adaptations and things like that, as opposed to if he was coming to me and he wanted to get to advanced piano literature eventually, And so we want to take that into consideration as well. But really that looking ahead, what's the next thing we're going to have to problem solve when they get to that next level? So I took all of this data and all this information, and Jennifer and I discussed it a lot, and we came up with a new form for the music adaptation plan. Now the purpose of this is twofold. The first one is definitely to collect that data and that information on exactly what we're doing, because we want to create best practices in adaptive instruction. But the next piece to that is that plan going home to a private lesson teacher, band director, or whatever, that they have something very clear that they can work with. And then beyond that is also, it can be used as a tool. Our hope is then to be training music teachers using these principles so that they have a method for approaching adaptation. So it now has 3 purposes where it only had 1. And then Jennifer is going to take you through an example of one. I can do that.
That would be great. So I'm not 100% sure if you described one of the main reasons we needed to do this, was because we found not only our kids, but other people's kids as well, wanted to have music lessons and couldn't find somebody that was within that particular specialty to teach them. The person that would teach a violinist was not another violinist, but some piano player in somebody's church that just had a heart for this poor kid who had tried 10 different teachers and nobody would take them on. So this map is intended to get that expert private teacher to the point where they feel comfortable identifying, oh yeah, I recognize this. Okay, I can work with this. Got it. I know where we are. I can take the student from there. Otherwise, we found that the professional teachers just weren't willing to take the student on, and they would use all sorts of different reasons for that. So we're going to take a look at Elena. She plays the cello. She plays the cello with her feet, and when she very first started, she was in grade 2. She had a background of having been in a children's choir. Mother was a music teacher. That's me. I'll just go ahead and admit it right now. Older sister plays the cello. So she wanted to do what older sister wanted to do. Her musical goal was to play the cello like her big sister. Her learner disposition was determined. She enjoys music. She had just moved to a new state. She felt unmoored. Learner differences, and this is really important because we found that just because somebody has a visible disability doesn't mean that there isn't an invisible disability. And in this particular instance, if you look down at the learner and or behavior, she needed scaffolding to sustain attention and learn new concepts. She does not trust teachers to fully consider her differences due to past experiences, and we found most of the students coming to camp that described them. And she prefers to stay with what she knows rather than branch out into new areas. And again, that described a lot of the kids coming to the camp. So adaptation, she had a bow hold modification, detached frog taped upside down to an unmodified bow for crip. Now, those of you who have modified bows for children might look at that and cringe. Wow, that is a real hack. Yes, it was. It was the beginning of something. And this is what Deb had talked about, taking it in stages, starting with, for instance, a cello on a pillow when you first start is actually a really good idea because you need to know what you're working with first and get some foundations built and then start building the adaptations. Obviously not for everybody, but in this case, that's what we did. So position was above the cello because she's using her feet. Unmodified cello, smaller size, lays flat on the pillow. Specialized instrument stand. We will pursue this in future iterations once the student grows into the next size instrument. Then that's the summary. Look over here, traditional technique, tapping technique on each toe. Now what was interesting is this was actually not a traditional technique I was using with traditional students. But once I saw how well it worked when we were trying to get toe independence, I went, well, wait a second, I have some of these same issues with my kids with fingers. And I applied it to them and it worked beautifully, and I have this whole technique that I've developed out of that. Adaptive technique notes. The A string faces the student, giving the right foot to the left-hand job, and the left foot the right-hand job. This needs to think through the terminology so that she can connect with the rest of the musical world. Do we call it first toe, or do we call it first finger? This was my kid. I felt comfortable saying, we're gonna call it first finger, and in the end, this really did help her make transitions to other teachers and orchestras. She knew how to follow the lingo, and when conductors would come up to me and say, I just don't even know how to talk to your kid, I said, don't worry about it. Treat her like she's a traditional musician. She'll translate it in her head, no problem. And it really opened doors. So future considerations, the foot must be suspended above the cello. That takes a lot of balance and strength. Maybe seating higher up would be helpful. Something to help her come from above the cello. More stable bow holder. Need something to hold the cello still as it currently slides around the pillow and keep the cello on the small side. So go ahead and let's go on to the next one. 2 years later. Oh wait, we have a video. Okay, so this is for the next adaptation. This is what it looks like in the next map.
1, 2, 3.
I'll tell them you clapped for them. So note that as we progress in age and development, you're going to see some things changing just because she's getting older. So we're going to skip down to learner disposition. She enjoys playing music with her friends. That couldn't have been possible in the earlier math. Needs encouragement to work on new technique, and currently interested in pursuing piano. So learner difference, going down to the learning and behavior, she needs scaffolding to sustain attention still doesn't trust teachers. She appreciates space and time freedom to consider and answer questions. She may shut down if pushed. Adaptations, we now have a bow hold modification. We consider work on a new bow holder through May We Help, and specialized seating, tall chair with a wicker seat, positioning the instrument, cello stand from May We Help, and that's what you saw both girls using. And interestingly enough, they have different cello stands and different bow holders because they are different people. And an adaptation is specific to the individual person, and I've had people say, oh, we want to make one device to fit everybody, and I really just don't believe that that works based on my experience. So we're going to go back to technique, beginning extension stretches and shifting exercises because she needed it, because her toes are smaller. Adaptive technique, the toes serve as fingers. There's an extra toe though, because there are 5 toes and only 4 fingers on the cello. So we had to do some designation. What do we call this thing that doesn't exist anywhere else? All right, next slide. Sorry, it's a little artistic. There you can see the bow holder. Starting to get musically into what she's doing. I'll talk about that in my next talk. Okay. So, fast forward to grade 6. She's 12 years old now. Do you see what she's been involved in? Now she's in a youth choir, school choir, 4 years of cello lessons, summer piano, summer music camps, Suzuki Institute workshops, and she's just been given special permission to move to a more advanced orchestra. So she's coming along. Learner disposition comes along with it. She enjoys playing music with her friends, feels confident in her foundational setup. She's ready to explore more. Elena seems to be at the beginning stages of building an identity as a cellist. And if you saw the way she was moving, you can see that. So you go down to the learner and behavior differences. Elena responds quickly when she knows what the answer is. Whoa, that's different. So she's most comfortable when she feels competent, and at times may have difficulty with motivation if she's not the best at what she is doing. Skill development becomes really important at this stage. So adaptations, you'll see. They started 3D printing things. It was awesome. Technique, traditional. Elena's shifting. She tends to drop her foot down to connect with the fingerboard. Her foot gets tired. What does that sponsor? Future considerations. The cello stand's working well. Needs an adult to carry it and set it up. Look, this is something the student can set up by herself. Needs to give leg the frequent muscle breaks because she's playing longer now, and we're still working on getting the perfect angle in the bow holder. We worked on that angle for like 6 years until she found something that worked perfectly. Next one. I'm so sorry. It gets very impressive later on. So go down to learner disposition. Quick to answer questions, starting to see the opportunities music can open, such as playing at benefit concerts. Gave her travel. She loves to travel. Learning behavior differences. Student is confident in her understanding of music, quick to volunteer to play for others. This is a very shy kid. Willing to engage in musical conversation with the teacher. This is her one area where she can branch out. And is this my last one? She is grade 8. No, let's go to one more. So here, she enjoys playing music with her classmates in orchestra and siblings and friends in youth orchestra. Let's hop up and look at the musical background now for her. High school choir, 8 years of cello lessons, chamber music camp, Peabody Chamber Week at Peabody, the conservatory, high school orchestra, Reading Youth Orchestra, Lancaster Youth Orchestra. This kid is playing everywhere now. She is confident in her playing, identifies as a musician, seeking out opportunities that music can open at this point. So she's no longer a passive learner. When Elena encounters any difficulties, she will avoid first, then work through it with scaffolding, often with success. So moving down to adaptations, we're down to only we now know what 3D printed bow holder she needs, but we need to replace it every 6 months because she breaks them, because she's playing so hard. She also needs to get her bow rehaired that often, and new strings, and etc., like with any good musician. So then we're working at future considerations. She needs a case for carrying the travel stand when traveling on airplanes now. So, and we're still working on independence with stand setup. So this is the progression that we go along with the expectation of we're going to need all these adaptations as you get better and better, and it's pretty exciting. So that is, that's the map.
Yep.
The next session is about motivation. So as you could see, motivation drove that map higher and higher as time went on. How do you motivate students who historically are not allowed in the same space as traditional students? The title of my talk is Building Skill Through a Sense of Capability in a Young Adaptive Musician. And as other musicians start recognizing that capability, the need to advocate becomes less and less. It never goes away, but it becomes less and less. Barriers start lowering. It gets easier and easier. So, but the key is the development of that skill. The key is being able to be the musician that somebody recognizes. The best speakers on behalf of this concept of motivation is those who have been through it themselves. So I talked to 5 students who were at the adaptive music camp as young children and grew up, and talked to them about their experiences, because these students had each attained a high level of music playing and had been involved in multiple orchestras and experiences. They are incidentally all string players because I was their teacher and I'm a string teacher. So we met at the Cincinnati Adaptive Music Camp. I asked questions centered on Dacey and Ryan's self-determination theory, focused on motivation, and we used relatedness, competence, and autonomy questions, and then some extras as the interview went on. I made it flexible and curious and asked questions that led to the students themselves, guiding the interview at times. So we talked about the beginning, the intermediate, and the advanced stages of their playing, their favorite musical experience, which built motivation, and their least favorite experience, or something that reduced motivation, which obviously those two go hand in hand. We talked also about accessibility and inclusion issues and how they impacted their motivation. So the first person, I get to use the clicker now? Okay, I just go like this? Yeah. Great. So each of these students said something. I think of them as students. They're adults now. But each of these people said something pretty impactful. So Allie was the first person I interviewed. And she said, when I have a goal, I will find a way to meet it. Because this is the other thing about motivation. It's very individual. Every single student, every single person had a completely different thing that motivated them. So this is Allie. How do I make it play? Okay. Do you see just holding her cello for her? So, did you see how excited she was to play? Like, so cool. But in order to play, she had to have somebody hold her cello. She was at the beginning of her map. The things that motivated her were musical competency and experiences where she had to meet a challenge. So auditioning for competitive youth orchestras, she thrives on competition. When she did her book one recital, that was where she She got to invite everybody to watch her play for 30 minutes, and it was the first time she felt like a true musician. She was putting a concert on all by herself, and those people that were there to hear her. Chamber groups, specifically at chamber camp, in small group settings, I can make suggestions, and I can talk about music, and I can prove myself as capable. She said people would look at her, and they would talk down to her, but then once she started talking, people went, oh, she knows what she's talking about. And then when she played, that's when all questions just disappeared. One of the things that she enjoyed the most was actually sounding good. True musician at heart, right? Knowing she would be able to advance or improve was what motivated her, but her music teacher was her key influence. The relationship with her teacher had 2-hour master classes where she could learn from other musicians. The key element there is her teacher had 2-hour master classes. Once a week, I believe, or every 2 weeks, but very consistently. So you know what kind of teacher has that, what kind of student is willing to go to a 2-hour master class once a week. So you know that the expectations were high. And Allie was not only having that expectation from her teacher, but also from her peers. I learned from other musicians and other people how they do things. Hearing other cellists play something and observing how they move their hand across the fingerboard helped me see how I needed to do it. It enabled me to learn my own adaptations for myself. So the key here is that this adaptive player was her own best authority on how to make those adaptations, and the ideas that she then brought back to her lesson so that she could make the adaptations she needed. I learned 2 different ways to do vibrato, side to side and forward and back. Now, those of you who play cello, violin, whatever, you go, wait a second. Those are not ways to do vibrato. There's one way to do vibrato, and that other way, that is not a good way. Because of my playing position, it didn't sound bad. It just sounded different. Oh, do you see how we have to wrap our minds around different ways? I got to decide for myself when to use each of these, and this helped me feel independent, especially when other musicians didn't have this option. See the competition coming through. Knowing that the unusual way I played my vibrato gave me a different and unique sound, and it helped me feel independent even of the other cellists. So what reduced her motivation? She practiced more than her peers in high school, so her teacher made her an assistant teacher. That might have motivated another student. It did not motivate her. She wanted to be challenged. So in junior symphony, they made her feel like it was a chore to move her stuff. That doesn't feel good when somebody's doing you a favor and makes you feel it. At the adaptive camp, she said, it felt like a different space. And I actually was not originally going to ask about the adaptive music camp. I thought that was somewhat self-serving. But each one of these students talked about adaptive music camp as being a different space. Some of her best memories from growing up were at camp. Everything was normalized. There was no fear of judgment. At CAMC, if I got down on the floor, the way she needed to sometimes, other people joined me, which was wonderful and different. Now that she's responsible for herself, she must establish her needs ahead of time. She especially likes it when people ask her to establish her accommodations ahead of time. So I'll go on to this one. Sorry, I've mentioned my dirty And again, I know we want to hear more, but this is Vivaldi Double Cello Concerto. It is considered by students the most fun piece to play and what everybody gears toward. She got to play it in a beautiful space. This is a church with beautiful pillars and a gorgeous sound. And she said hearing that sound come back at her was like the pinnacle of her musical playing. So on to Inga. Inga's quote is, anyone should be able to learn to play, like in Ratatouille, where anyone can learn to cook. So for Inga, the impact of family was what motivated her the most. At first, I loved listening to my mom play and hone her skills, and it was a beautiful experience. So this is Inga playing with her family, which, yes, that's me. That's my other daughter. So the quote from her is, "The harder you work, the more you can play difficult pieces and surprise yourself, because it becomes fun and you get to the point where you're just having so much fun." So this is a main theme throughout interviews, seeing the result of their hard work. So it's a huge intrinsic motivator. So you're not just being told that, oh, you play well for somebody who plays with their feet, which, by the way, was the biggest insult to my kids. Whenever somebody said that, I had to say, stop rolling your eyes. That's rude. You know. CAMC, she again talked about CAMC. It was a beautiful experience, incredibly rare. I think it helped push the narrative that music is for everyone at every playing level. It was more exciting because of that. The whole camp was about adaptation, from musicians to teachers to engineers. The excitement was because we were all figuring it out together. It wasn't just about the music, but there was science and engineering that went into it as well, making the experience more full-bodied in a way. Not just for able-bodied people. It did a good job of showcasing that. It gave me more confidence because I was able to give to others in a way that only I could. A unique experience for me and for others. And that's where she gave the Ratatouille quote. She was also able to play on a cello donated to her by a foundation. As she said about auditions and competitions, I felt really good about them. This is a thing that I'm a doctoral student, and I'm doing a lot of reading, and by the way, you're my hero. One of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is, don't push these students because they'll just fail and feel bad about themselves. And I can tell you from experience, nothing could be further from the truth, at least not for the population of students that I have been working with. So I felt good about them. The auditions were mostly blind auditions, so nobody saw who was playing. That helped me because sometimes I got third or fourth chair in a youth orchestra, where there are like 16 cellos. And I could know that I got that high score because I knew for a fact that that was me. I felt like that motivated me to be a better player. She could say motivationally, I was involved in LLMEA, youth counties, districts, quartets, Peabody, chamber camp, youth orchestra. I love playing music with other people. My mom motivated me to do it at first. But once I started, I enjoyed doing it for myself. Peabody in particular. That is probably the most prestigious place we went because Peabody Conservatory is big in our area. Peabody was the most inspiring because of the high level and because of the diversity. She met a lot of different people from a lot of different places. So then, I'll tell her you clap for her. So Katie is a violinist. She needs to use the bow adaptively, but the left hand is just fine. I will say that Katie is very, I have run across a lot of violinists that need to play with a bow holder of some kind in the right hand. And then the left hand needs no adaptation whatsoever, or flipped. One of the hands, the hand that plays the left hand fingering, doesn't need any adaptation whatsoever. And yet when I hear them play, the left hand is a true handicap. And that's because of, if you're a string teacher, we've all seen this, right? And not holding the instrument well, not being able to, the grip that's so strong that the fingers can't do what they need to do. There's certainly no agility, and intonation is out of this world. So Katie was an example of somebody who had started trying to figure it out and needed a lot of assistance with that left hand. And I attribute that to teachers being so focused on the thing that needs help that they don't realize, well, you're the teacher, you're supposed to help all of it, right? So the left hand matters too. In fact, it's very significant, and it can hold back. You do all that adaptation and the student ends up not sounding good. And what did we learn from Allie and from Inga? When it doesn't sound good, the motivation goes down. And often then I would find out a year later that these kids had quit. And that was my consistent experience. It's one of the reasons that Deb and I decided to start the Adaptive Music Camp, is because we saw group after group of students start and then quit. Not our students, just observed at conferences and so on and so forth, like get-togethers. So Katie's elementary music instructors were thrilled that she was interested in learning to play an instrument, and they supported her all the way. She began playing because she had the opportunity, so it was provided for her. And she stayed with it because of her private teacher, who says, whatever Katie needs, I will do. She didn't feel judged against what a student without adaptations would be able to do. She was just free to figure it out her own way. Once she reached high school, her connection was with her peers. Her parents encouraged her through middle school and then gave her her choice in high school. She stuck with it because those were her friends. That was her group. And she appreciated in particular that she could be competent in an area where her physical differences did not hold her back. So this is Katie figuring it out. Okay, and that adaptation was not ours. She has a father who's an engineer and was very involved, and I think she had like a gazillion adaptations on that hand. Corinne, it made me feel vulnerable because I'm trying to play, and I really just love the music. He's talking about his adaptations. So Corinne had, in particular, both left and right hand adaptation. His left hand, he only had 2 fingers, and that was never the issue. It was always the right hand being able to hold the bow. He had a shorter than usual arm for managing that sort of thing. He went through many different prosthetic adaptations. So for his journey, he started at CAMC, but then he went on to have 3D printed bow holders, and he left and well, he didn't live anywhere near us, but because his adaptation could not hold the bow accurately, he used a myoelectric hand, and it kept dropping the bow. And this would happen even in the middle of concerts. High anxiety. Speaking to the difficulty of finding the right adaptation, he said, I was frustrated with the prosthetics, with not being able to play with a good wrist functionality or proper connection to the bow. It made me really mad sometimes. It made me feel vulnerable because I'm trying to play and I really love the music. I love the sound. I get goosebumps playing in an orchestra like the Washington County Symphony Orchestra. So the Washington County Symphony Orchestra is a community orchestra, mostly with elderly people in it. He said he was the youngest there by about 40 years, and he absolutely loved it. They played music, movie music, they played for the community. They played their repertoire specifically with the community in mind, and there was an energy in the concerts that he really appreciated. So this is when he first started, and I was focused. He had an adaptation there with the right hand, and then he was working with his left hand. At first, we were experimenting with all different ways, and this was one way. So later, he went on to play, as you see, doesn't his myoelectric hand look amazing? But then they added this element so that the bow could stay straight. And he loved to play. He would play in his backyard for fun. This is him playing in the symphony orchestra that he really appreciates. Making music naturally is his thing. About CAMC, I really like the teaching style. The teacher had a tendency to push. Other teachers were usually cautious and didn't want to push because they didn't know where the limits were. These teachers at camp knew we could do better. Missing a limb was not an excuse. The teacher knew our capability and pushed us to those capabilities and possibilities, and that made me who I am today. So it was really cool to work with Corinne. Then Elena. And you saw her map, so I think you probably have a feeling for who this kid is. Playing with friends made a big difference for Elena, being part of a community of musicians where she was expected to grow along with everyone else, and she kept working at the hard stuff. She says her teachers never gave up on her. They made sure she did her exercises and stretches even when she said she couldn't do it, so very true. Helped her set her adaptive foundation and enabled her to get just focus on the skill when she got older. She began to identify as a musician in high school when she started doing all the competitions, but she was at chamber camp, cello choir. I want to skip ahead to, and here she performed at college with a friend, and they won this competition. It says 2 hands and 2 feet up there at the top. She got a bobblehead of the college president, all sprayed in gold. But in Reading Youth Orchestra, she auditioned. They audition and they get their chair assignments, and she had like chair 3 or 4. But the director decided that people couldn't see around her, so could she please go to the back of the section? And I didn't realize what had happened until the concert, and I saw her sitting in the back like that. And I said, what happened? I thought, you got 4th chair? Did you get demoted? My first thought, okay, what'd you do? Did you not prepare your music? No, Mom, the director just said that people could see better if I was in the back. She said that was the single most demotivating thing she experienced in her whole musical career. So, how can we inspire the next generation of adaptive players? I don't have time to tell you, but hopefully you figured it out from this talk. Thank you.